Nancy Pelosi had recently dismissed Senator John Kennedy, suggesting before an audience of 6 million viewers that he was a politician who treated a congressional hearing like a casual crawfish boil. She delivered this insult, utilizing the exact condescending tone she had honed over 39 years to belittle men. However, she selected the incorrect individual to humiliate the elderly gentleman hailing from Louisiana, whom she had just brushed aside, a Vanderbilt magna cum laude graduate, Virginia law alumnus, Oxford scholar, and 5-term state treasurer, simply chuckled. He subsequently polished his spectacles utilizing a cloth handkerchief. Following this, he delivered a singular phrase that those 6 million spectators would recall far longer than any statement she had uttered throughout her nearly 4 decades in public administration. Stemming from that precise remark, from the exact second the viewing gallery erupted into laughter and subsequently recognized the inquiry was far from a mere jest, Nancy Pelosi comprehended that the figurative crawfish boil had abruptly transformed into a judicial courtroom, positioning her as the accused. She had mistakenly perceived him as a quaint, unsophisticated elder. In reality, he was an Oxford-educated attorney, strategically utilizing a charming, down-home inflection. The vast discrepancy between her perception of his character and his actual intellectual capacity amounted to exactly $649 million. It was a sum she would perpetually remain incapable of justifying. The proceedings were barely 11 minutes underway, and Nancy Pelosi firmly held the reins of authority. She had commanded similar chambers for nearly 4 decades. Her resume included orchestrating Democratic factions, forcing the Affordable Care Act past a resistant legislative body, staring down 4 different commanders-in-chief, aggressively tearing a State of the Union transcript in 2 on live broadcast, and seamlessly converting that defiant action into a digital fundraising campaign that generated $8 million within a mere 48 hours. Nancy Pelosi did not merely walk into meeting rooms, she took absolute possession of them. Consequently, this particular Judicial Committee room, focusing on Congressional stock trading regulations, a space populated by senators she had successfully outlived, outmaneuvered, and significantly out-fundraised over 40 years, belonged to her long before she even took her seat. Her introductory monologue consisted of 6 minutes of quintessential Pelosi rhetoric. It was precise, immaculately polished, and delivered with the restrained anger of a politician who genuinely feels her historical achievements speak autonomously and who intensely despises being required to vocalize them once more. She claimed to advocate for systemic reform. She insisted she had perpetually championed such reforms. The Foundational Stock Act existed as established legislation primarily due to her efforts. Furthermore, the proposed Pelosi Act, a titular designation she neither selected nor possessed the power to terminate, was currently advancing through the congressional pipeline, bolstered by her explicit approval. She maintained she possessed 0 secrets to conceal. She emphasized her presence was entirely voluntary. Ultimately, she implicitly challenged any individual present to imply otherwise. Senator Kennedy was scheduled next in the speaking order. He occupied a seat 4 positions away, situated behind a designated placard displaying Louisiana, sporting spectacles that appeared marginally oversized for his facial structure and a necktie resting slightly too relaxed against his shirt collar. He presented himself exactly as he invariably did, resembling an individual who had accidentally meandered into the legislative session straight from a recreational fishing excursion, appearing not completely certain of the specific committee he was attending. Yet Pelosi was entirely aware of reality. She had resided within the Washington ecosystem for a sufficient duration to identify the deliberate masquerade, the rustic Southern drawl, the purposefully narrowed eyes signaling feigned bewilderment, and the carefully crafted rhetorical inquiry that seemingly originates from a rural porch, but strikes with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor's desk. She recognized that Kennedy was far from an uncomplicated individual, yet possessing knowledge and exhibiting respect are distinctly separate concepts. And Nancy Pelosi possessed a track record of never respecting anyone who willingly opted to appear less influential than their true capacity. Within her operational universe, authority was meant to be ostentatiously exhibited. Within his realm, true power remained strategically camouflaged. She committed her critical error prior to Kennedy even parting his lips. As the committee chairperson directed attention to the senator from Louisiana, Pelosi tilted herself toward her designated microphone. She did this not to project her voice through the device, but rather to guarantee the microphone captured her intended sound, mirroring the specific manner a woman leans toward audio equipment when she desires the entire assembly to register her dismissive sigh. I hope the senator from Louisiana has a question that doesn't sound like it came from a county fair, she stated. This is the United States Senate, not a crawfish boil. Laughter ensued. It was not the gentle chuckling of a group appreciating a clever quip. Instead, it was the piercing, harsh laughter of an audience observing a dominant woman belittle a professional peer and escaping consequence because of her identity as Nancy Pelosi, a woman who had successfully evaded consequences for 39 years. Kennedy simply grinned. It was the unhurried, expansive, Bayou-style grin of a strategist who has recently been provided with the precise opening he sought. He extracted his spectacles, retrieved a fabric handkerchief from his suit's breast pocket, and commenced wiping the glass lenses in a sluggish, meticulous fashion, the specific method a person utilizes when they desire every individual in the chamber to wait for their completion before initiating dialogue. Ma'am, I appreciate the invitation to the county fair, he began. I do love a county fair. They have funnel, cake, and ring toss, and a game where you guess how much the pig weighs. A deliberate pause followed. The spectacles were returned to his face. At the county fair, we call what happened to your family's finances getting took. Somebody walks in with $100, walks out with a teddy bear and no money, and doesn't know how it happened. He continued, except in your case, ma'am, it's the other way around. Your family walked in with $610,000 and walked out with $649 million. And nobody knows how that happened either. The viewing gallery detonated into sound. This was entirely devoid of polite chuckling. It was the unrestrained, full-throated eruption of a chamber that had just witnessed an individual absorb a targeted insult and subsequently bounce it back with massive compound interest within the brief 3-second window of uproarious laughter. Before any attendee could regain composure, Kennedy unsealed a manila folder. It was the identical, worn manila folder he carried into every legislative gathering, presenting an appearance suggesting it contained mere grocery lists, though it invariably never did, and he began to read from it. Kennedy refrained from utilizing a computer. He avoided digital screens entirely. He relied solely on physical paper, printed documents, hand-scribbled annotations squeezed into the margins, and physical tabs designated with sticky flags that had been affixed with the meticulous exactness of an individual who comprehends precisely which sheet holds the specific statistic designed to terminate the debate. The physical folder represented an analog weapon within a digitized environment, and that was exactly the intended message. An open laptop communicates, "I am prepared." Conversely, a battered manila folder declares, "I have been operating in this arena longer than you have been observing. Now, ma'am, I'm not as sophisticated as your husband," he stated. "I don't trade options on Nvidia or buy Tempest AI before it triples. I'm just a country lawyer from Louisiana, but I can read a Stock Act filing." He pressed on, "And I have some questions about the filing dates, not the trades, the dates. The Stock Act requires disclosure of trades within 45 days. That's the law. The Congresswoman voted for that law. 45 days. I want to read some of your husband's filing dates, he announced. He positioned his index finger upon the document's surface. The physical movement was highly intentional, reminiscent of an educator pinpointing the exact sentence within an academic textbook. Visa trade executed the 1st of July 2024. Disclosure filed 67 days later. 5-day requirement, 22 days late. Nvidia options executed November 2023. Disclosed 52 days later, 7 days late. Tempest AI options executed January 2025. Disclosed 89 days later, 44 days late. He raised his eyes from the physical file. Now, ma'am, I want to tell you about a friend of mine named Earl Thibido, he articulated. Earl is a plumber in Baton Rouge, 63 years old. Been fixing pipes since he was 25. His retirement is $180,000 and a 401k, most of it in blue chip stocks, including Visa, because his guy at Edward Jones said it was safe. Earl filed his taxes 3 days late, 1 year, 3 days. The IRS fined him $340. Earl paid it because Earl follows the rules and Earl doesn't have a team of lawyers to argue about it. Your husband filed 89 days late on a trade that made millions. Earl filed 3 days late on a return that owed hundreds. Earl got fined. Your husband did not. Ma'am, who is the Stock Act for? Earl, or people like your husband? Pelosi instinctively grasped for her audio transmitter. The reaction was rapid, heavily procedural, and tightly controlled, showcasing the automatic reflexes of a politician who had successfully directed legislative floor debates and moderated committee panels for 4 consecutive decades. Senator Kennedy, the Stock Act filing requirements are met by my office in accordance with. Ma'am, 67 days is not 45, he interrupted. I went to public school in Louisiana, but I can subtract and willful violation of the Stock Act, that's Section 105, carries a fine of up to $50,000 and up to 1 year in prison per violation. I count 3 late filings in 2 years. That's 3 potential violations. That's up to $150,000 in fines in 3 years. For Earl, 3 days late on his taxes was $340. For your husband, 89 days late on a stock trade was nothing. Not a fine, not a letter, nothing. He proceeded to polish his spectacles once more. The physical action, replicated for a second instance, was rapidly morphing into a metaphorical countdown clock. With every instance, the glasses were removed. The atmospheric tension within the chamber plummeted. Kennedy's vocal delivery subtly altered. The characteristic rustic Southern drawl dissipated slightly, not vanishing entirely, but rather shifting to the periphery, similar to how wild underbrush separates when an individual discovers a paved road concealed beneath it. What materialized was the sharp vocalization of a professional who had successfully completed studies at Virginia Law School, furthered his education at Oxford, and possessed the precise knowledge of how to construct a phrase that functions simultaneously as an interrogative question and a direct criminal charge. Now, ma'am, your office has a standard response. I have it memorized because I've read it so many times, it's like scripture to me. Quote, Speaker Pelosi does not own any stocks and has no prior knowledge or subsequent involvement in any transactions, end quote. Does not own any stocks. That is technically correct. Your husband, Paul, owns the stocks through Financial Leasing Services Incorporated, his firm, his account, his name. You don't own them. He does. A pause hung in the air. The spectacles were removed. The handkerchief was deployed. But ma'am, and I mean this with genuine curiosity, not disrespect, Do you need to own the cow to drink the milk? The audience gallery erupted once more. The figurative imagery was deeply rooted in Louisiana culture, yet the underlying rationalization was pure legal academia, and virtually every participant within the space comprehended both elements concurrently. The metaphorical bovine represented Paul Pelosi's investment portfolio. The resulting dairy product symbolized the $649 million they mutually enjoyed. And the inquiry, cloaked as a lighthearted jest regarding agricultural practices, was the exact query the Securities and Exchange Commission utilizes in every single investigation concerning spousal benefits derived from insider trading. Does the spouse who isn't executing the trades actively benefit from the financial maneuvers? Pelosi's facial muscles visibly tightened. The fleeting micro-expression persisted for merely half a second, representing the specific physical clenching of a politician who has just witnessed her entire legal defense condensed into a farmyard animal analogy and remains incapable of deciding whether to display offense at the imagery or experience fear regarding its undeniable accuracy. Ma'am, you live in a home worth $25 million, he continued. Stock profits paid for that home. You eat dinner on a table that stock profits bought. Your husband's portfolio has returned, by conservative estimates, over 180% since you entered Congress. The S&P 500 returned about 100% less than that in the same period. Your husband outperformed every hedge fund manager who didn't have a spouse setting the house floor schedule. You say you don't own stocks, but you own the life that stocks built. And the question, the one that the SEC asks, the one that the Stock Act was written to address, is whether a person who benefits from trades should be treated differently from a person who makes them. Because in every other area of law, ma'am, the beneficiary and the actor are the same person. It's only in Congress that we pretend they're different. Kennedy navigated to the rear section of the manila folder. The specific sticky flag marking this page was colored red, serving as the solitary crimson indicator within a binder predominantly filled with yellow markers. The color selection was akin to all things regarding Kennedy, likely an accidental occurrence and simultaneously a highly premeditated tactic. And that resulting ambiguity was exactly the intended effect. I want to talk about timing, not trades, timing. Because, ma'am, your husband's portfolio has a remarkable gift. It knows things before the market knows them. Some people would call that genius. I raise chickens in Louisiana. When my chicken knows it's going to rain before the Weather Channel does, I don't think the chicken is a meteorologist. I think someone told the chicken. The gallery supplied laughter, however. The amusement was noticeably briefer during this instance, primarily because the assembled crowd was beginning to understand Kennedy's methodical tempo, and his underlying cadence was, the humorous remark serves as the foundational setup, the setup functions as the hidden snare, and the snare inherently contains quantifiable data. The 1st of July, 2024, Paul Pelosi sells 2,000 shares of Visa between $500,000 and $1 million 85 days later, September 24th. The Department of Justice sues Visa for antitrust violations. Stock drops 5.5%. December 2022, Paul Pelosi sells 30,000 shares of Google. 1 month later, January 2023, DOJ sues Google for antitrust violations. January 2025, Paul Pelosi buys Tempest AI options. Within 30 days, the stock goes from $35 to $89, up 154% in a month. Earl Thibido has Visa in his 401k. The day DOJ sued, Earl lost $2,800. That's Christmas for his grandchildren. That's the leak in his roof he's been putting off. Paul Pelosi sold 85 days before Earl lost that money. Earl didn't know, because Earl doesn't eat supper with the former Speaker of the House. Ma'am, a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, not Fox News, not a PAC, the National Bureau of Economic Research found that congressional leaders outperform their peers by up to 47%. 47%. That is not instinct. That is not luck. That is information. And the question is where the information comes from. Who told the chicken, ma'am? The interrogative sentence lingered ominously in the atmosphere of the committee room. 5 precise words, a thick Louisiana inflection, a poultry-based analogy, and lurking directly beneath it, the highly specific judicial inquiry that every single SEC enforcement prosecutor poses during every individual insider trading examination. Was there a demonstrable source of material, non-public information? Kennedy had successfully articulated the SEC's fundamental question utilizing the SEC's foundational vocabulary, concealed it within a poultry metaphor, and served it with a regional twang. Furthermore, every single observer inside the chamber mentally grasped both the superficial chicken joke and the underlying legal threat simultaneously. Pelosi offered no immediate reply. Instead, she reached for her standard procedural shield. Point of order, Mr. Chairman, she declared. The senator is engaging in speculation that is not supported by, ma'am, I asked, who told the chicken? That's not speculation. That's a question. And the chicken made $649 million. Somebody should ask, Kennedy interjected. Kennedy navigated to the final marker, the crimson sticky note. The contents of the folder were nearly exhausted, yet the concluding segment did not pertain to financial equities. It concerned an issue considerably more severe. I want to move on from the portfolio, ma'am, he stated. I want to talk about your husband's other activities, because I think they're relevant to the question of whether your family operates under the same rules as Earl Thibido's family. Lance Henling, Archer R. Paul Pelosi, DUI in Napa County. Blood alcohol, 0.82 over the legal limit. His Porsche struck another vehicle. The other driver was injured. Mr. Pelosi pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor. He received 5 days in jail, served his community service, and 3 years probation the 3rd of July, 2026, 13 days ago. Paul Pelosi is alleged to have been involved in a hit-and-run incident. The investigation is ongoing. He intentionally stalled, polishing his spectacles. For the third occurrence, the metaphorical clock was audibly ticking. Now, ma'am, I bring this up not to embarrass your husband. I bring it up because of what you are building at UC Berkeley, the Nancy Pelosi Institute for Representative Democracy. You are raising $50 million. You will co-teach a course on Congress, on ethics, on democratic governance. Ma'am, I don't know how to say this with the politeness you expect from a crawfish boil, so I'll just say it plain. You are building a $50 million institute to teach ethics. Your husband has a DUI conviction. Your husband is being investigated for hit and run. Your husband's portfolio outperforms every hedge fund in America, and you say you don't know anything about it, and the institute is named after you. At the crawfish boil, we call that brass, he asserted. I believe the term in Washington is legacy building. But the legacy you're building and the record you're leaving, they are not the same building. And at some point, someone is going to walk into your institute, open a Stock Act filing, and ask who told the chicken. Senator Pelosi countered. She articulated a defense primarily because Nancy Pelosi possesses a track record of continuously delivering a response. She did not achieve her pinnacle of authority by remaining mute while male colleagues in relaxed neckties recited from yellow folders. She stood as the most dominant female figure in the entire chronicle of American governance. And she absolutely refused to permit a conservative representative from Louisiana to distill her historical legacy into a simple poultry analogy. The senator from Louisiana has provided entertainment this afternoon But entertainment is not evidence, she retorted. My family's finances are fully disclosed, fully legal, and fully transparent. Every trade is public. Every filing is available. If the senator has evidence of wrongdoing, not metaphors, not chickens, not county fairs, I invite him to refer it to the appropriate authorities. Until then, I consider this line of questioning closed. The rebuttal was executed masterfully. It represented premium Pelosi, heavily regulated, deliberately condescending, and distributed with the inherent power of an individual who had aggressively terminated lines of questioning for 4 decades and harbored zero intentions of ceasing that practice now. Her loyalists within the viewing gallery collectively exhaled in relief. Her political aides, monitoring the exchange via digital displays, commenced composing the viral video segment. Kennedy simply bobbed his head. It was the unhurried, measured nod of an adversary who has just received the exact justification he anticipated and is preparing to systematically demonstrate why that exact justification constitutes the core issue. Ma'am, you just said fully transparent. I want to test that, he challenged. I have one question, one number, and I'd like a straight answer. Your family entered Congress in 1987 with between $610,000 and $785,000 in stocks. That is your first disclosure. Your estimated net worth today is $649 million. Congressional salary over 39 years, generously calculated, is $8.7 million. $649 million minus $8.7 million is $640.3 million. He calculated aloud. Ma'am, where did $640 million come from? He abstained from pitching the query in the bombastic, theatrical manner Donald Trump might have employed to solicit raucous audience approval. Instead, he submitted it in the identical fashion a seasoned litigator corners a testifying witness with an inquiry to which the attorney already possesses the verified solution, softly, with surgical precision, and armed with the infinite patience of a man possessing unlimited hours and occupying a tribunal that refuses to shut its doors. You said fully transparent. That number, $640 million, is the transparency test. If you can explain it, you pass. If you can't, he deliberately left the concluding phrase suspended. He possessed no obligation to complete it. The fractured sentence hovered within the chamber, akin to an accessible legal dossier, patiently anticipating an authorized signature that was destined never to arrive, simply because the authentic justification regarding the origin of $640 million stems from either lucrative equity transactions, which directly confirms the validity of the bovine analogy and transforms the spousal exemption from a loophole into an outright admission of guilt or a assertion of I am unaware, which simultaneously dictates that the previous Speaker of the House genuinely lacks knowledge regarding the genesis of $640 million. And that scenario hardly represents genuine transparency. It signifies either pure cluelessness or elaborate theatrical performance. Furthermore, both of those specific attributes are inherently suited for a rural county fair. Pelosi provided zero verbal response for the inaugural instance during the entire proceeding, and representing one of the incredibly rare occurrences throughout her 39-year tenure in civic service, Nancy Pelosi remained completely voiceless. This was demonstrably distinct from the calculated, tactical quietness of a tactician meticulously selecting her upcoming vocabulary. This was the profound quietude of a person who has been confronted with a numerical puzzle and remains entirely powerless to resolve it without directly implicating herself in misconduct. Kennedy shut the manila binder, slipped the cloth square back inside his suit pocket, and adjusted his necktie, the subtle, mundane physical actions of an individual who has successfully concluded his professional labor and feels adequately prepared for his evening meal. Thank you, ma'am. I yield back my time, and I apologize for the crawfish boil. But at a crawfish boil, we at least know what we're paying for, he concluded. Here outlines exactly what transpired during the subsequent 72 hours following John Kennedy's query regarding who tipped off the poultry. Furthermore, if your perspective dictates that Nancy Pelosi emerged victorious from that verbal confrontation, continue reading. 3 specific video excerpts materialized, targeting 3 distinct demographic groups, inflicting 3 separate varieties of political destruction. Do you need to own the cow to drink the milk? Secured 23 million online impressions. The video succeeded primarily because it merged humor with legitimate jurisprudence. Everyday citizens distributed the media because they found it comical. Legal professionals circulated the footage because the spousal exemption inquiry mirrors the precise metric the Securities and Exchange Commission applies to evaluate whether an uninvolved marital partner holds liability for illicit insider trading. Kennedy successfully posed the agency's core question utilizing a mere 5 words and a livestock metaphor, ensuring both agricultural workers and specialized securities litigators comprehensively decoded the message. Who told the chicken, ma'am? Accumulated 19 million digital views. This specific segment birthed an internet phenomenon within mere hours. Who told the chicken rapidly morphed into the definitive 4-word encapsulation for any legislative equity trading controversy, universally applicable to every elected representative, every financial maneuver, and every dubiously synchronized acquisition or divestment. The phrase materialized on commercial apparel and vehicular decals. A specific social media profile named @Who Told the Chicken commenced publishing every fresh Stock Act document accompanied by a poultry graphic. The digital profile acquired 2.3 million subscribers inside a single week. $649 million minus $8.7 million. Is $640 million. Where did $640 million come from? Captured 14 million viewings. This particular clip circulated heavily throughout economic journalism channels, pension discussion boards, and the specific ecosystem of American citizens who possess 401k portfolios and financial consultants intimately understanding the sheer impossibility of transforming $610,000 into $649 million devoid of exclusive intelligence, inaccessible to the general populace. The video required 0 animal metaphors. It relied entirely upon basic mathematics. And fundamental mathematics, once executed publicly on national broadcast by an individual wielding a paper folder, simply cannot be uncalculated. During the initial week, Pelosi's communications staff distributed a concise 4-sentence declaration, marking it as the briefest press release of her entire professional journey subsequent to the Trump legislative signing altercation. The release characterized Kennedy's interrogation as rural theatrics and maintained that all economic disclosures had been submitted in strict accordance with relevant legislation. The communication completely ignored the delayed submissions. It ignored the marital loophole. It ignored the $640 million discrepancy. It ignored the poultry inquiry, a formal refutation that labels factual documentation as mere theater constitutes, within the political lexicon of Washington, a tacit admission that the provided data is factually accurate, just highly problematic. The Federal Election Commission initiated an official evaluation regarding the submission timelines of Paul Pelosi's Stock Act records. Specifically, they targeted the 3 tardy documents Kennedy had vocally highlighted. The scope of the evaluation was heavily restricted. Were the documents submitted past the deadline, and were those delayed submissions classified as intentional under Section 105? An intentional delayed submission threatens a maximum penalty of $50,000 alongside 12 months of incarceration for each infraction. 3 late documents equated to 3 possible charges. The FEC procedure did not constitute a full investigation. It served as the preliminary stage, leading to one representing the bureaucratic equivalent of lifting a telephone receiver and inputting the majority of the required digits. Senator Rick Scott, an individual who had previously demanded a Government Accountability Office audit of Pelosi's equity maneuvering history, leveraged the committee exchange to officially petition for the assessment. The GAO agreed to the request, a comprehensive review focusing on legislative trading behaviors, explicitly featuring Pelosi's documentation as the central investigative subject, was officially slated to commence within 90 days. During the second week, the SEC published an instructional memorandum avoiding direct mention of Pelosi, but broadly addressing the marital exemption loophole. The document explicitly stated that the Stock Act's transparency mandates fully extend to the economic holdings of the submitting official's marital partner, and that the determination regarding whether a submitting official reaps benefits from their partner's equity maneuvers remains a factual assessment highly pertinent to legal enforcement. The publication purposefully excluded Pelosi's name. It possessed no requirement to include it. Every economic reporter across the United States interpreted the text as the SEC directly responding to Kennedy's bovine analogy. Indeed, you possess no requirement to officially own the bovine. Consuming the resulting dairy is entirely sufficient. Paul Pelosi's counsel submitted an unprompted, revised disclosure encompassing all financial maneuvers executed between 2023 and 2026, rectifying submission timelines and supplying supplementary context to the trade explanations. The submission was not mandated by statutory law. It was heavily coerced by the consecutive 72 hours of media scrutiny generated after a legislator inquired about who informed the poultry. Furthermore, the document itself, the very action of unprompted modification to filings that had previously been classified as entirely compliant, served as a direct concession that the historical documents had, in reality, failed to achieve full compliance. By the third week, capital generation for the Pelosi Institute stagnated. It did not entirely implode, but rather stalled, representing the more silent and fatal iteration of economic decay. Three separate benefactors, accounting for $4.2 million in promised capital, formally requested an interruption pending the ultimate clarification of the lingering inquiries surrounding the family's economic records. The benefactors avoided citing Kennedy's identity directly. Instead, they referenced reputational concerns, the identical two-word combination that major financial institutions had previously deployed when removing the Pelosi Tracker ETF from their approved asset portfolios. When an individual's financial backers and massive index funds utilize the identical terminology to characterize them, the terminology ceases to be a subjective perspective. It solidifies into a terminal diagnosis. The vehicular collision inquiry persisted. Paul Pelosi remained formally uncharged. The examination remained in its preliminary phases. The details were continually emerging, and absolutely zero definitive findings had been established. Nevertheless, the inquiry undeniably existed, and its mere presence, situated alongside the prior intoxicated driving conviction, the equity maneuvers, the delayed documents, the marital loophole, and the $640 million mystery, generated an overarching paradigm that absolutely no academic entity, no university curriculum, and no $50 million financial trust could successfully erase through instruction. The established paradigm did not inherently denote criminality. Rather, it represented a cultural phenomenon. It showcased the operational blueprint of a household maneuvering within a fundamentally distinct version of America compared to the reality inhabited by Earl Thibido, a version of America where intoxicated driving resulted in simple community labor, where delayed submissions triggered zero consequences, where $640 million provoked zero scrutiny, and where the academic institution bearing your identity instructed on regulatory frameworks you personally circumvented Earl Thibido was never interrogated by any major broadcasting network. He avoided achieving viral fame. He never transformed into a digital phenomenon. He remained a 63-year-old pipe specialist residing in Baton Rouge who suffered a $2,800 financial blow on a Visa equity position that Paul Pelosi had safely abandoned 85 days. Prior, who had subsequently been penalized $340 for submitting his revenue documentation a mere 3 days past the deadline, and who had recently observed a representative from his native state vocalize the exact inquiry he had been presenting to his spouse across their dining table for 24 months. How come they don't get in trouble and we do? The inquiry completely lacked any poultry references, yet the solution remained identical. An individual supplied intelligence to the poultry. Someone perpetually informs the poultry. And until an external force uncovers their identity, until an individual unseals the Stock Act dossiers, analyzes the SEC publications, scrutinizes the delayed records, challenges the marital loophole, and specifically demands, under the penalty of perjury, while recording devices are active, the identity of the person who informed the poultry, the countless Earls populating the American landscape will perpetually hemorrhage $2,800 increments, continually finance $340 penalties, and perpetually watch from their respective dining tables located in Baton Rouge, Dearborn, and Riverside, as the metaphorical poultry merely accrues greater wealth. Kennedy returned to his Louisiana residence. He refrained from executing any celebratory media tours. He declined appearances on conservative news networks. He simply retreated to his homestead, representing the exact action Kennedy invariably undertakes. After a committee session concludes, he returns to his property, nourishes his literal chickens, and patiently anticipates the subsequent paper folder to populate its own contents. The folder inevitably replenishes itself. That remains the fundamental truth concerning individuals who occupy $25 million estates, manipulate $649 million within financial markets, and construct $50 million academic monuments dedicated to their own legacies. They lack the capacity to restrain themselves. They are incapable of halting their actions. Consequently, the documentation, the delayed files, the fragmented submissions, the functionally compliant yet practically deceptive records persistently materialize. And located somewhere within the borders of Louisiana, an individual possessing a fabric cloth and a battered paper folder continuously examines them. He possesses unlimited time. He possesses his spectacles.